All right. All right. Hello, hello. Microphone check 1 2 1 2. Hey, everybody. Welcome to B2B Hour here on Auto Conversion. This is a live monthly webcast series we facilitate here for B2B marketing and sales professionals. Oh, I need to scoot over. I'm getting myself cut off here, aren't I? Lo and behold. Um, so I apologize, B2B marketing and sales professionals. So that includes business owners, leaders, entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, bootstrappers, freelancers, corporate executives, you name it. Today is Wednesday, October 12th, 2022. I am Ryan Girardi. I am your host, and I appreciate you joining us. Thank you for taking the time to be here out of your busy day. You might be here live. You might be watching the replay, which would be awesome if you are, because once we finish the live stream at the end of the live stream today, it becomes unlisted. And that means the only way to access the original YouTube recordings that we live stream is to have the link. Well, how can you get the link? Well, for one, you can be subscribed to our YouTube channel. So if you are not already subscribed to our YouTube channel, and maybe take a moment to do that, you can also text the keyword auto conversion to 855-766-7585. I can see in my monitor that my face is obscured. That might make it a little bit better. Let's scoot over this way. All right, that should help. So our general theme for the show is how to stay connected and engaged with customers, strategic partners, and employees. That's three very different audiences. How do you stay connected and engage with those? That's our general theme. We offer a very unique product here on Auto Conversion to help you do this. And so we invite you to learn, to network, and to grow your personal brand, your professional brand, grow your network, grow your online reputation. Some would call that public relations. Now, last month, our focus was on avoiding burnout and breaking through B2B failure statistics. This month, we shift our focus into video marketing, remote work, and we're going to touch also on the idea of a culture of well-being. Our guests today include Rob Holman. He is an international speaker and three-time leadership author, best-selling author. Also have Kelly Jennings, who runs a ministry and a consulting business as well. She'll be on the show, and we're going to get into all of these topics. So sit back, relax, hang tight, and we'll get going in just a moment. All right, so you could probably tell from our video theme there that we are focused on the idea of well-being. This is something we have implemented into the show since its inception. And one of the things we do is we feature a wellness and mindset segment on the show each month as well. And so that will be our theme going into the mindset segment, which is a culture of well-being. Now, layoffs have been at the forefront of a turbulent 2022 for U.S. workers, and that's thanks primarily to the shadow of a potential recession. In fact, many would argue that we are in a recession, but there's also signs that suggest we're not, and then there's signs that suggest there's even more of a recession to come. Now, cuts by tech companies, which we've talked about, for instance, Crunchbase News says 42,000 tech workers were laid off through mid-September, just in 2 to 3 weeks. And these cuts by tech companies have hogged the headlines, but no sector has really gone unaffected. Cost cutting has become common. Meta, formerly Facebook, Google, Walmart, FedEx, I think Target was in there. I mean, we've had lists. We've gone through these major companies facing significant layoffs. These are just a few of the names, in the mix there. But all the news isn't that grim. Jobless claims have hit a 5-month low. That's through the last week of September. So to me, that's curious. It's like there's more to the story. If you have all these layoffs occurring, why are jobless claims at a low, at a 5-month low? Well, in a recent Forbes article, an alternate headline reads, "Executives and leaders are leaving their roles due to burnout." And in the article, Kara Dennison says, that a Deloitte survey revealed that almost 70% of executives are considering leaving their jobs for workplaces that care more for their well-being. And according to that same study, 57% of employees outside of management roles want to quit for similar reasons. So that begs the question, which is it? Is it layoffs? If it is, then that could be a telltale sign of things to come economically. But if it's the latter, if there's an exodus to self-employment, then there could be an epidemic of disinterest in the professional white collar class. And most likely it's a little bit of both. It's not just one or the other. But what does that mean exactly? I apologize. I skipped ahead there. According to leadership author Rob Holman, who's going to be up here in a minute, in order to overcome this epidemic, leaders today must learn to create and sustain a culture of well-being from the inside out. But what exactly does this mean? What is a culture of well-being from the inside out? And I pose, could this also be why so many white collar workers are also are fighting to continue to work remotely as much as possible? I'm going to switch over here. I'm going to scroll down on this article. And by the way, I'm here at autoconversion.net, and there's many different ways to subscribe. You can sign up for free, or you can subscribe to any one of our programs, which I'll get into later. But if you do, then when we publish articles like this leading up to shows like today, then you'll get an email copy. You'll get that in your email box and you'll know about that. And what I wanted to do is head over to this article here. So GM, General Motors, I'll bring that article up for you there. They're in the process of conducting damage control because executives there sent out a memo that was going to require remote workers to get back into the office. I don't remember the exact specifics. It wasn't like full time back to office. It was like 3 days a week back to office, if I recall. Yeah, actually, it says right there, required to return to physical locations at least 3 days a week. And that caused pushback. And I got to thinking, I thought, why is it when the pandemic hit that so many workers were able to do their jobs from home? And now that we can go back to the workplace, there's a lot of pushback. People don't want to do that. And I thought that was kind of funny. I mean, seriously, if you think about it, let's think of construction workers. Construction workers can't do their jobs from home for the most part. They have to be on site to build. Hospital workers, medical workers, they have to be on site. Athletes have to go to work. They have to be, in the stadium, in the field to perform their job. I could literally go on and on and on of all the work that has to be performed on site in office. Yet when it comes to white collar professionals, there's all this pushback about coming into the office. I could take it a step further and say, I too don't like to go into a corporate professional workspace 8 to 9 hours a day, 5 days a week. But that's because I find them inefficient. That's just me. I find that there's a lot of, let's just say, distractions and non-productivity, which is good for health, place, I guess, culture. But by the same token, I do a lot of remote work, but I'm always on site. Like, for instance, I'm doing the show here. I'm not doing this out of my house. I have, but I actually go on site to a studio to do the show. So I think that leads to something. I think there's something more behind this. That's just me. I think there's something more behind this. There's clearly pushback and disinterest of workers at all levels in the professional space. And yes, you could call it an epidemic of disinterest. So in a few minutes, I'm going to have Rob Holman up. We're going to talk about culture of well-being and also get his take on the idea as well. I'm going to go back to the article here. A couple of other things that were worthy of bringing up. Like I mentioned, there is talk of recession. There's an 80% chance that the U.S. will fall into recession. And this is according to Steve Hanke, at Johns Hopkins University. He blames the Federal Reserve for exploding the money supply, which is very true. I think from what I understand, something like 80% of the current US money supply was literally printed in the last 2 years. That could be, you could fact check that, but whatever that number is, so much of our money has been printed in the last 2 years that, yes, the value of that dollar has gone down. We see that. We see that in everything, obviously at the gas pump, in grocery stores, seeing it at restaurants, in retail stores. You know where you're not seeing it? You're not seeing it in your paycheck. That's where we're not seeing it. You're not seeing the rise in your paycheck matching that. Now, the central bank's failure to manage inflation by reducing the amount of money that it pours into the economy during the pandemic has seen supply slow to suddenly. And Hanke predicts that a recession in 2023. So does Jamie Dimon from Chase Morgan Stanley predicts that as well. So all things are pointing to a looming darker recession, and we're seeing that in cutoffs, and we're also seeing the fact that inflation is not going down either. So clearly, as a business owner, right? If you let's break this down. If you're a business owner, obviously you have to keep a pulse on the economy, because that's going to affect things like supplies, cost of operations, and cost of employees too. And we also see this exodus of professional workers from the corporate sector as well, from the professional working class as well. So yeah, it's a divisive time, to say the least, and plenty of make for good conversation as well. A couple other things we want to get into today is TikTok. You know, here's an article here. Let me bring this up. Posing the question, is Google losing younger audiences to TikTok? And I have some really bad news. I forgot my power supply and my computer's going to die. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to bring Rob on for his segment, and then we're going to go right into our panel discussion, because there's a high chance I'm actually going to run out of battery power very soon. So hang on one second. We're going to bring Rob Holman on for today's Mindset segment. Hang tight. Rob Holman, hey.
Hey, you're looking good. You're sounding good. A joy and honor to be with you, Ryan, my good friend.
Well, I appreciate that. And I feel bad because I did forget my power supply for my MacBook, and I'm streaming, and I had full battery power at the start of the show, and I'm 20 minutes in and I'm already down very low. So we might have to accelerate. And folks, this show just literally could end midstream. So we'll see what we can do. What do you have to share for us today? Culture of well-being. The stage is yours.
Well, I'm going to get right to it. And I was going to say, if Ryan just happens to go out, when the cat's away, the mice shall play. I'm going to have a lot of fun with this, but I'll cut right to the chase. Talking about well-being, it has everything to do with our mindset. We need to actually get used to saying no far more often. Here's what I mean by that. If we want to see workplace culture grow, enhance, develop, mature, use any word you want that's healthy, that speaks to multiplication, reproduction, with the health of our people, our team members, and the entire organization. It has everything to do with making sure that the leaders, their team members, and every single employee within the organization feels cared for and valued. I think most of the reason why executives and employees want to jump ship is because they're not feeling valued and cared for. So many of them have a wonderful heart, a heart to serve. That's why they're in a leadership position. That's why they're part of a team and a team dynamic. But oftentimes the trap can be in the midst of a team that's moving together, shaking together, unified towards a common goal, is we say yes way too much. And when we say yes way too much of things that we ought not engage in, maybe we didn't sign up for, perhaps we enter into someone else's territory, dare I say responsibilities, then we can get stretched way too thin. And then it pays a toll on our well-being. And I'm talking about our spiritual, emotional, and physical well-being. And I'll say this, that in my mid-20s, owning 2 companies, now this was just a couple years ago between me, you, and everyone else. I'm just kidding. But in my mid-20s, 2 companies, I was not, I didn't escape from this and what we're talking about with well-being. I was the biggest people pleaser on planet Earth because I had a heart that wanted to help people. So I would say yes. I would say yes. And then totally I'd overcommit and underdeliver. And what do you think it did to me and to my relationships? It damaged my well-being, and it also hurt in the short term and long term some of my relationships. So let's get practical. How can actually we get used to saying no? Typically, people come tugging at us, wanting our time, resources, and energy in one of 3 categories. One, either they want a favor. Second, it's an obligation. We feel obligated to do so. Or third, it's a genuine opportunity. Now, letting our yes be yes and our no be no means everything. Because if we say yes too much, you're going to end up like I was in my mid-20s and like so many executives, leaders, and team members are today. And they're either burnout or on the verge of being burnout. So here's the magic of it all. In order to discern whether it's a favor and you should say yes, an obligation like, I don't know, or a genuine opportunity, what helps us sift through this and get used to actually saying no is understanding our specific priorities in any given season. Do you know your specific priorities in your personal and professional life? And think holistically with me for a moment. Think spiritual, think physical, think career, think emotional, think mental, think financial. Do you know? And don't just even say them generally. Be as specific as you possibly can. Then, when someone comes tugging on you to say, hey, would you do this? This is only going to take a couple minutes. Or, hey, do you mind taking on that? Now, not by natural default, based on a heart that actually cares for the individual, and by default, you just say yes, 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 yes. But you can quickly discern whether or not you should say yes or you should say no. And I always say this, that when you say no to things you ought not engage in and get used to it, comfortable and confident in saying no based on that, you actually get to say yes to the people and things that matter most. So I just want to let you know, you are not alone. If you are not a good boundary setter, it took me a while, but I learned the secret and I'm sharing it with you today. I'll tell you, it does not take a whole lot of time. And hopefully by this advice I'm sharing with you that's highly practical and helping you with your specific priorities, you can get a much bigger head start than I ever had. So hopefully that helps everyone. All right, Ryan, we're back at it.
All right, guys. I don't know how long this is going to last, but Kelly, I'm giving you the stage. I want your response to Rob's segment there on culture of well-being.
Well, Rob, that was really good. And I really appreciate that, because I think we have to recognize that no is one of the best and safest boundaries we can set for ourselves. When we become compassionate for ourselves, we have to be willing to say that I'm the person that's taking the risk. And if the risk is helping me to stay safe, mentally, physically, and emotionally, then that's the risk we have to take. I think sometimes saying no, and especially in the workforce, we're afraid that it may cause us to lose a promotion or lose an opportunity or losing our acceleration in the company. But also at times, if we say yes, we can actually promote ourselves out of that great position because we're not really qualified, or we're not mentally stable enough to handle the new things that we're trying to take on. So I think we all have to be mindful that no is a safe boundary. And when we say yes, we have to mean it, because we cannot live in regret. And I think when we become very compassionate about who we are and what we want for ourselves, we become our own priority. Because if we're not compassionate, we really cannot be anything for anyone else until we're caring for ourselves. And it takes a lot of mental health to be able to work towards those areas where we sometimes neglect it by constantly saying yes, and we burnt out. I remember Ryan mentioned that some CEOs are in that burnout stage, and it's likely because they failed to say no at the proper times. And because that, they're now living in regret, and they're running from the workforce because they need that time for themselves to refresh. So I think it's really good for all of us to practice no. I practice it no all the time as a mother, as a wife, as a ministry leader. You have to set those boundaries if you're going to stay safe, if you're going to be healthy, and if you're going to really love yourself enough to be able to walk away and take the risk of whatever the outcome of that no may mean.
Kelly, that was so eloquent, and I appreciate that. And I feel so bad because my computer's going to die, and we're not going to be able to get into this, this important subject matter. But I do think it's I think it's a great topic. I think looking at what's going on in the world today, and really trying to understand the world's not black and white. There's not one reason why things are the way they are. There's a mixture of things going on. But Rob, do you think I'm onto something here? Do you think there's a correlation between there is a mass exodus of professional white collar workers? It's not just layoffs per se.
No, I do. And I think because people, at least they like to believe they know themselves fairly well of where they're most productive, their well-being. But I think they can be, the average person, myself included here, I could be blinded. Sometimes I think I'm more productive on the home front, but I'm actually more productive when I go to a studio, for instance. And there's other times where it might be the opposite. So I think at the end of the day, I do believe it's all anchored. This conversation is anchored, whether people stay or they go or whatever the case may be. Do they feel cared for? Do they feel like the higher ups, the bosses, the leaders, the C-suite executives care for them and have opened up a transparent conversation based on some of the things we've already talked about and more that says to them, dare I say, shouts to them, you matter, you're important, you're valued. And I think at the end of the day, then, if people feel that way, perhaps some are going to be more productive at home and others are going to be more productive in a formal working environment. But I really want to see us get back to and stay with that open and honest conversation, because then it goes from a program or something that you're intentionally doing once in a while into it's now infused into the culture. And I think that requires something of leaders. It requires an honest and open conversation on a very consistent basis to some of these values that we're talking about. Some of these principles we're discussing are actually embedded into the culture to where it becomes not something you do. This is who we are.
Yeah.
Doesn't it seem like over the last decade plus, especially with companies such as Google and Facebook, coming into the world, I guess, into the workforce, they have strived to provide a culture of amenities and leisure. And I mean, literally like beer and alcohol at the workplace, games, ping pong, foosball, pool, activities. It's like all this effort's been done to create a leisure-like environment to make work a place to go. And yet still people want to get away from it. So something is not translating or permeating through in the culture over these years. It just seems that way to me.
Kelly, do you think, I'll jump it. Kelly, do you think that people just flat out want more and more autonomy?
I really do. I think people really, there's a saying that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I think what people are really looking for is the ability to really be flexible with their own lives. And I think what we have to realize is that COVID exposed a lot of that as much as we are, Eastern culture, capitalist. We want to make a lot of money. We want to be around people. That's really not our desire. We really have an Eastern culture mindset that makes us want to be close to our families and really want to be more time with our families. And being able to work from home gives people that type of freedom to be able to express themselves in the workforce while they're still giving themselves time for family. And I think family is becoming more priority than actually the workplace for most people.
Yeah, Ryan, I think workplaces and the leaders of those workplaces need to make some big decisions.
Yeah.
Are we truly, because it's one thing to say, it's another thing by action and experience. Do we really believe in our people as
Right.
human beings far more than their productivity?
Right.
And I think at the end of the day, that's going to be something that many have to, they've got to answer that question. I think some, honestly, they believe more in productivity and the end result, which is dollar bills, where others are like, not so fast on making the money. I care more about the people.
Yes.
I think Ryan froze on us.
Yeah, I think he's
Kelly,
gone.
And like I said before, when the cat's away, the mice shall play. And we're about ready to have some real fun. But yeah, hey,
Right.
just to continue the conversation a little bit, I love what you've highlighted, and I don't mind chiming in. But do you think most employers, most workplace environments, are they willing to take the risk that we're talking about based on putting people before things for greater results at the end of the day? Do you think they're willing to do that?
Well, the way the economy is going, there's a big fear. When we're talking about an anticipated recession and everyone's doing everything to recover, and we have to ask the question, not so much why does the employee not want to come back to work, but why does the employer want them to come back to work? What is the demand that's making you feel it's necessary to bring us back into the workplace when we have proven, and I'm speaking on behalf of the employees, we have proven that we can do this outside of the workplace. And it brought much more, I would say, much more mental health. When you think of some people who take 45 minutes to an hour to get to work, that's stressful right there.
Sure is.
The fact that they have to get up before the break of dawn to find out what kind of clothes they have to wear, and then get to work and then spend another hour or two going home, that's time away from family. A lot of families are missing out on their children's, after school activities, and they realize I've sacrificed enough. My company should not understand this. And when they see that that's why there's this big revolt now. I'm not coming back. And now the employees actually have the negotiating tool. They have the basketball in their hand and they're playing the game they want to play because they know you need us, but we can have shown you that we can do the job outside of the workplace. And if you're not going to actually consider our concerns, then we'll find another place to go. We'll find another job. We'll work from home. We'll build our own companies and our own businesses from home, because they realize their stress level has probably went down 50% from not having to get into the workforce on a certain time, be there half a day, all day, and then to beat all the traffic of having to go back. So I think employees had to consider the health and the mental health of their employees, because I believe if they really consider that, they will have a great level of more productivity. They will get more out of their employees if they really took care of their mental health and ensuring that wherever you can produce is
right.
fine with us.
That's right. Well, listen, it's such gold that you're giving us. I see Ryan Girardi is back. Ryan, hey, we missed you. We completely understand.
I've been listening the whole time.
Oh, you've been listening. That's good. That's good. Yeah. I was just going to say in closing, if we should be wrapping it up soon or not, but I'm interested, Kelly. I think you're just whetting my appetite and everyone else's appetite too, based on what you're sharing and how you're sharing it. If there's a leader listening that has tremendous influence within their organization. Perhaps they're a C-suite exec, they're a high-level manager. What advice then would you give them based on the stats we read, some of the conversation that we've been having on putting people before procedures for greater results, et cetera, et cetera? What advice, and be as practical as you want to be, what would you give them today?
You know, the greatest skill I think we always overlook when it comes to communication is listening. And I think we have to listen to our employees now. We really have to listen to what they're saying, because their voice is really the most important voice in this time that we're in now. And if we listen, I think we will become more productive, and even companies will be even greater, have seen much more success. Their bottom line will definitely increase, because like I said, people don't care how much you know, but when they know you care, they'll have your back. They'll have your back. They'll take care of you as much as you take care of them.
I love that. And one final thing, Ryan, before you take over your own show. We're such great friends. This is awesome. But no, one last thing, Kelly, for you then. You gave some very good practical advice for the leader. How about for the employer team member that doesn't have as much influence and impact within the organization in a formal way? We know so many, regardless of what position you have within the organization. I think the most powerful people within are ones that have a heart to serve, a heart to love, a heart to care for. I think we'd all agree with that. But let's just say, formally speaking, they're just a team member. They don't have as much power within the organization. What piece of advice would you give them in light of our conversation today?
Well, for the employee team member, I think you have to let your voice be heard. I think we've been silent for too long, and that has caused somewhat the chaos that we have now. But I think we have to allow their voice to be heard, and they have to be willing to speak up for what they believe in. And if mental health is one of their priorities, they have to be willing to establish a priority that they will not budge in. I know we get to the point where I'm just the middleman, or I'm the low person on the totem pole, and I'll just do what everybody tells me. But I think we have to recognize that even the lowest person on a totem pole has a voice. And if they're willing to let their voice be heard, then I believe even the higher ups will begin to hear what everyone else is saying and begin to start making changes that works for everyone.
Kelly, when I listen to what you're tapping into, because I like what you're saying, and like there's lower ups, there's higher ups. And that goes right back to the idea of status.
Right.
And we are very status driven in society. Status is often defined by money, but there's other ways to define status, such as recognition and whatnot. And my 2 cents on this are that even though it sounds great and we'd love for the higher ups, the higher status, the leaders and decision makers to give everyone a voice, and I think a lot of companies have strived to do that, there's still this never-ending quest or competition to raise in the ranks. I think even people that don't want to rise in status feel like they should and have to.
Yes.
Because that's what you're supposed to do. That's what's expected. And for the person that maybe is like, you know what, I don't want to play this game. I don't want to climb the ladder. I want to be here. Then it's kind of looked at as like, well, you're not ambitious and you're not striving for success. And so I do think a lot of this has come down to, over decades, is workers being pushed to reach a certain level of status. And maybe the COVID pandemic gave us all a chance to step back and say, well, maybe that's not what's really so important to me after all. If anything I've seen over the past couple of years is how widespread greed and corruption really is and permeated into this country. Yeah. And it's been occurring over the last, you've always had greed and corruption. It's just part of society. We're adults in this day and age over the last 20 years, but a lot of the things that we're facing now are challenges that people have faced, decades past. So I guess what it boil this down to is I see corporations they're designed to create profit.
Mhm.
That's what they're intended to do. And that has to come at all costs. No matter how much profit, you have to keep growing market share.
Yeah.
And that comes at the cost, for the most part, of the workers, because they're not getting all the benefits and the amenities that the top might say. I think it was Mark Cuban. You know Mark Cuban, Rob, who owns
Yeah.
the Dallas Mavericks.
Mhm.
I mean, he just said the other day, nobody has any business making as much, having as much wealth as I do, right? I mean, he came out and said, like, it's not necessary. There's probably a lot of truth to that,
Right.
but that doesn't keep him from doing anything about it or changing the structure. So I don't know. I think greed has a lot to do with this exodus. I think a lot of people are just like, you know what? That's for the 1%, and I'm not into it, and I'm going to go this way. And the long-term ramifications could be that it does bring down this, tyranny of profit that exists. It's so widespread in our culture. Possibly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And I think too that the organizations, one of the ways I try to fan the flame of organizations, regardless of where they're at in this process we're all talking about and discussing,
Mhm.
is philanthropy,
Ooh.
is community, is because the more that you can fan that flame, I'd say in every person, every company, there's a little bit of a light going on. Little bit. Now, some you can see it, it's a bright light. Others, it's just a little flicker. But can we see, number one, can we see that flicker? Can we see that light enough so to come alongside to fan it into flame?
Right.
And so for me, if an organization can catch on fire, that ultimately the reason for their existence isn't just to make money,
Right.
but it's actually to see people, neighborhoods, communities, and this world transformed, in a very healthy way, physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, you name it, right? Holistically. Then I think we're getting somewhere.
Yeah.
And some organizations, I think, are in alignment with that, like right quick yesterday.
Yes.
And others, there's a lot of chiseling work to be done.
Yeah.
And I thank God for the chiselers that go out there and they're just chiseling away because they know they're called to something greater to serve those individuals and those organizations through the chiseling.
Yeah.
And then there's others that come alongside of highly receptive people and organizations that are already there. And there's an ease and there's a seamlessness to that process. And now that flame gets bigger, and it just becomes a wildfire that can catch other organizations, other communities on fire. So regardless of where someone's at, can we see the flicker of light? That's my heart.
Yeah, I agree. I think, like you said, there's some organizations that are there, and the ones that are not there, sometimes the more you have, the more you want to have. And to break away from that mindset that it's okay. And if COVID didn't teach us anything, there was so much that we did without during COVID, and yet we still survived. Companies weren't able to produce the cars, and a lot of people were staying at home. But even in that, we still survived. And so, America is bigger than we think we are as far as when it comes to compassion. But as Ryan said, the greed sometimes shadows that, and it causes us not to realize that we have a bigger heart and we care more for people. But the risk of letting that be known, and really changing the culture. Culture is so hard to change once it's been set in a certain way. But to begin to start chipping away at that and say, we care more about people. And if keeping them safe is what helps them, then I'm willing to not get my $4 million bonus or more, right? But it has to come to a place where we all think that way. We have to get everyone on the same wavelength of thinking. Otherwise, you're considered, CEOs and the big time 1%ers, they have their social groups, then they have their status. And, if one person does something, they're like, hey, what are you doing? It's going to look bad on us. You're going to make us look bad. So to be able to bring them together to say, hey, let's do this together. So no one is like the outlier. No one is the sore thumb, but we're all doing it together. And so change can happen, but change can only really happen if more than one people or one person is doing the change.
A lot of wisdom there, Kelly. I like what you're saying. I think we're onto something, guys. I think we're witnessing a form of disruption,
Mm-hmm.
and what you're speaking to is taking a higher road within the work environment. And as much as that appears to have occurred over the last couple of decades, I don't think it has.
Right.
I think profits and greed and status have all been, when it comes down to it, have all been the primary motivators and drivers in the professional world specifically, but in business in general. And I'll go back to what I said earlier. There's most industries where you cannot have workers working remotely from home. And I think if you apply that reality and say, look, why does office work, white collar professional work, why should it be different? And maybe it shouldn't be. Maybe it should hold the same standard that all workers have. Who knows? But this is what we're witnessing.
Right.
And Rob, I think what you bring to the table is a culture of well-being. It's like saying, look, if you want to have a prospering company of the future,
yes,
it's like you're both saying, it does revolve around the people.
It sure does.
And I don't think there's a way around that.
And Ryan, I want to get back to your example of just very briefly of using sports, for instance, and using contractors or builders and stuff like that. They have to be on the field. They have to be on the court or whatever, if it's sports or if it's, building, construction. However, although, yes, they do, and they have to perform on the field or on the court or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm even finding that those leaders are looking for ways to where that NBA player could go home to their family a little earlier.
Yes.
You see, so because again, it gets back to the well-being. So even though the demand and the grind for the construction worker, for the NBA player, the NFL, whatever the case may be, is there, and they have to do it, or else the job just wouldn't get done.
Yeah.
But even thinking creatively of even when they have to be there on the ground, because the job depends on it, the goals and the money surrounding and the productivity, it depends on it. But even within that, how can we continue to care for them with work-life balance, work-life integration, to where the things and the people that matter most in their personal lives can also be there?
Yeah.
And I appreciate that. Those that are really thinking creatively to find that balance that I think so many are looking for.
Wow. It's almost like a call back to focus on the family, which has been definitely been sacrificed over the last decade plus.
Yeah.
Definitely has been. All right. Well, this leads to lots of great things. I'm glad I was able to get back up. I was able to keep up with you guys after my computer went off, because I had the monitor on my phone. Rob, this reminds me of a time that you had a show that we were running.
That's right.
And your guest just couldn't get the camera stuff working.
No.
And so we just kind of winged it
Right.
and made a show out of it without your guest. So, but in this case, it was the host.
Hey, Ryan, you know how we roll. And Kelly, you're welcome to the family, as you know.
Thank you.
There's no such thing as perfection, as we all know.
Yep.
But there's excellence, doing the best job you possibly can with what you've been given. Ryan?
Exactly.
You've rolled in excellence. Kelly, you've rolled in excellence. The show has moved on.
Yeah.
And hopefully people have been impacted.
Exactly.
Well, thank
no
you guys.
such thing as perfectionism.
Not in creativity.
Ryan, before I forget too, in light of the mindset segment, for those, we can always put this, in a follow-up and comment section, et cetera. But if people are looking to have and maintain boundaries in their life, and
Mhm.
actually leaders with their team members as well. I have a tremendous one-page PDF called the Boundaries Decision Tree.
Yeah.
And the keyword will be boundaries. And if you
Mhm.
text the number 855-766-7585, again, keyword boundaries to
Mhm.
855-766-7585, that will show up via text within a matter of probably 30 seconds.
Yep, it goes pretty quick. I'm glad you remembered that, Rob.
Yeah.
And it is the same text code as ours, if anyone's wondering. And that's because we provide the text campaign for that. So.
That's it.
All right, I will let you guys exit, and then I'm going to run the outro video, and I'm just going to end this thing. So thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Rob. I'm glad we made it through. And we're going to have you back, Kelly, and
Yep.
take another crack at this and try to
Absolutely.
make it more perfect next time. But we still got some good stuff out of this.
Yes. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks. See you guys later. Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.